Hey guys, Deez again. Thought I'd continue the joke. I've kept you in suspense for long enough. To recap, where we left off is the guy thought that by the time night came he'd be able to see the lights from the town that he had thought that he passed through. So he's camping out on top of like a little dune. So gets dim, and soon enough he starts stumbling over small rocks and things, and he finds a spot to sit and wait to see if he can, see some lights. Before he knows it, it's completely dark, and he realizes that he probably must have fallen asleep. Stands back up and turns all the way around, 360 degrees, looking everywhere for any signs of light. But all he sees is stars. Um, so he wakes up the next morning feeling absolutely lousy. His eyes are gummy, and his mouth and nose feel like they're full of sand. He's so thirsty at this point, and his throat is so parched that he can't even swallow. He barely got any sleep because it was so cold. He'd forgotten how cold it was at night in the desert and hadn't noticed it the night before because he'd been in his car. And he knows the rules of three. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Then you die. Some people can make it a little longer in the best situation, but the desert heat and having to walk and sweat, not the best situation to be without water. So, he figures that unless he finds some water, this is probably his last day. He rinses his mouth out with a little of the windshield wiper fluid. He waits a while after spitting a little bit out to see if his mouth goes numb or if he feels dizzy or anything. He's thinking about it, and he's like, is my mouth going numb? Or is it just my mind? But he's really not sure. He'll go a little farther, and if he still doesn't find water, he'll drink some of the fluid. Then he faced his next harder question, which was, where does he go from here? He could keep walking the same way he was yesterday, assuming that he still knows which way is which, or he could try a new direction, but he has no idea what to do. He looks at the hills and dunes around him and thinks that he knows the direction he was heading before. And so, just going by a feeling, he points himself somewhat to the left of that and starts walking. As he keeps walking, the day starts to heat up. The desert that was just too cold a couple of hours ago, really becomes too hot. It's like an oven. So he sweats a little at first, and then he stops. He's starting to get worried because he knows that when he stops sweating, that means you're in trouble. It's usually right before a stroke. So he's sitting there really debating, and he decides that it's time to try the windshield wiper fluid. He can't wait any longer because if he passes out, he's dead. So he stops in the middle of the shade of a large rock, and he takes the bottle out, opens it, and takes a big mouthful. He slowly swallows it, making it last as long as he can. Feels really good in his dry and cracked throat that he doesn't even care about the nasty taste. Takes another mouthful and makes it last too. Slowly, drinks about half of the bottle. He figures that since he's drinking it, he might as well drink enough of it to make some difference and keep him from passing out. He quit worrying about the denaturing of the wiper fluid. If it kills him, it kills him. If he didn't drink it, he'd die anyways. Besides, he's pretty sure whatever substance they denature the fluid with is just designed to make you sick. Their way of keeping winos from buying cheaper wiper fluid for the ethanol content. He can handle throwing up if it comes to that. So he walks and walks and walks in the hot, dry, windless desert. Sand, rocks, hills, dunes, the occasional scrawny cactus or dry bush. No signs of water at all. Like, the place is just completely dry, like a desert. Sometimes he'll see a little movement to one side or other, but whatever moved is usually gone before he can focus his eyes on it. Probably a lizard or a bird or a mouse. Maybe snakes, though they usually move more at night. He's careful to stay away from the movements because of that. After a while, he begins to stagger. He's not sure if it's fatigue, heat stroke finally catching up to him, or if maybe he was wrong about the denaturing of the white fluid and it was worse than he thought. He tries to steady himself and keep going. After more walking, he comes to a really big stretch of sand. Ah, this is good. He knows if he passes over the stretch of sand, he knows that he passed over the stretch of sand in the SUV. He remembers doing donuts in it, or at least he thinks he remembers it. He's getting woozy enough and tired enough that he's not sure what he remembers anymore or if he's hallucinating. But he thinks he remembers it. Good enough. So he heads off into it, trying to get to the other side, hoping that it gets him closer to the town. He was heading for a town, wasn't he? He thinks he was. And he isn't sure anymore. He's not sure how long he's even been walking anymore. Is it still morning, or is it moved into afternoon, and the sun's going down again? Must be afternoon. Seems like it's been way too long since he started out. He walks through the sand. After a while, he comes to a big dune in the sand. This is bad. He doesn't remember any dunes when driving over the sand in his SUV. Or at least, he doesn't think he remembers any. This is bad. But he has no other direction to go. Too late to turn back now. Figures that he'll get to the top of the dune and see if he can see anything from there that'll help him find the town. Keeps going up the dune. Halfway up, he slips in the bad footing of the sand for the second or third time and falls into his knees. He doesn't feel like getting back up. He'll just fall down again. So he keeps going up the dune on his hands and knees. While crawling, if his throat wasn't so dry, he'd laugh. He's finally gotten to the hackneyed image of a man lost in the desert, crawling through the sand on his hands and knees. It would have been the perfect image, he imagines, if only his clothes were more ragged. The people crawling through the deserts in the cartoons always have more ragged clothes. But his have lasted without any rips so far. Somebody will probably find his desiccated corpse half buried in the sand years from now. His clothes will still be in fine shape. Shake the sand out and a good wash, and they'd be wearable again. He wishes his throat were wet enough to laugh. He coughs a little instead, and it hurts. He finally makes it to the top of the dune. Now that he's at the top, he struggles a little bit, but he manages to stand up and look around. All he sees is sand. Sand, sand, and more sand. Find him about a mile away. He thinks he sees the rocky ground he left to head into the sand. Ahead of him, more dunes, more sand. This is not where he drove his SUV. This is hell. Or close enough to it. He's not really sure what to do. He decides to drink the rest of the wipe fluid while figuring it out. He takes out the bottle and is removing the cap when he glances to the side and sees something. Something in the sand. At the bottom of the dune, off to the side, he sees something strange. It's a flat area in the sand. He stops taking the cap, the bottle off, and tries to look closer. The area seems to be circular, and it's dark, or darker than sand. There seems to be something in the middle of it, but he can't tell what it is. He looks as hard as he can and he still can't really see it well enough from here to tell. He's gonna have to go down there and look. He puts the bottle back in his pocket and starts to stumble down the dune. After a few steps, he realizes he's in trouble. He's not going to be able to keep his balance. After a couple of more sliding, tottering steps, he falls and starts to roll down the dune. The sand is so hot that when it hits his body, for a minute he thinks he's caught fire on the way down, like a movie car wreck flashing into flames as it goes over the cliff before it ever even hits the ground. His eyes and mouth close, and he covers his face with his hands, waiting to stop rolling. And this is, I think, a good place to stop. You guys can be left in suspense for what's going to happen next. This is big. Oh, I'm getting excited. Anyways, also got this hat. Then just got this one too. It's pretty snazzy. I'd ask you what you think of it, but anybody that's watching this, I could probably just ask in person. So, yeah, I'll do that. Have a good one, guys.